I want to focus for a minute on the successful strike against Al-Zawahiri. Our professionals did an extraordinary job. Congratulations to them. But I think it's also important to remember that about a year ago, we pulled out of Afghanistan. At the time, the Taliban was out of power and Al-Qaeda was not around. So it is noteworthy where Zawahiri was, in Kabul. So Al-Qaeda is back as a result of the Taliban being back in power. And describing the current situation in Afghanistan as success is utterly absurd. About a month ago, in fact, the administration sent a Gitmo terrorist to Kabul. We sent a Gitmo terrorist to Kabul. So, after 20 years, in fact, the Afghanistan strategy was working. The Taliban was out of power. Al-Qaeda was not around. We were not losing people in combat. And that precipitous decision to withdraw a year ago produced the return of the conditions that were there before 9/11.
The Inflation Reduction Tax that the Inflation Reduction Act that the Democrats are proposing, yes, that was a Freudian slip there, is a title that would make Orwell blush. I mean, if you think about what the Democrats are suggesting here, you know, we've had record 40-year high inflation, and we've got now 2 consecutive quarters of a negative economic growth, which, however, the administration wants to define it, is a recession. And here they are talking about raising taxes, increasing spending, and sticking it to the job creators in this country when we're trying to deal with some economic challenges for which those are the absolute wrong prescription. And if you look even now at the Penn-Wharton model, which some Democrats have kind of held out as the gold standard in the past, has suggested that it wouldn't have any positive impact on inflation in the long run, in fact would increase it in the near term. And you look at what the Joint Economic Committee said in their analysis, which is that lower income Americans, in other words those under $100,000 a year, would bear a significant burden as a result of these tax hikes being imposed or being proposed by the Democrats. In fact, next year, 2023 alone, people under that income category would end up paying an additional $17 billion as a result of the tax hikes that are being proposed by the Democrats. So this is just yet another example of an administration and leadership here in Congress that is totally out of touch with what the American people care about. And the American people have figured this out, and they understand that there is nothing to be gained for them by raising taxes on oil and gas production in this country. All that's going to do is increase their energy costs. You look at electricity costs, you look at gasoline costs, you look at food costs, none of that is going to be addressed or dealt with by big fat tax increases on companies in this country that create jobs, because we all know that's going to get passed on. And so this is an opportunity by the Democrats for them to advance an agenda, which they've been trying to get at for a long time, a green climate agenda that massively increases spending, $60 billion on environmental justice, for them to define that later, and several $billion on urban trees, and tax credits for rich people in this country if you want to buy an electric vehicle. If you're rich enough to buy an electric vehicle, an $80,000 vehicle, and you make up to $300,000 a year, you can get a tax credit to buy an EV. That is the sum total of this administration's energy policy, is more EVs, and specifically EVs for rich people. Those Americans, ordinary Americans, working families in this country who are struggling to make ends meet and putting more on their credit cards or dipping into their savings just to keep up with the extra $9,000 that it's going to cost this year over last, that according to the Joint Economic Committee, for the basic necessities of life, those people are going to be looking at this thing going, what's with these people in Washington, D.C.? We're going to do everything we can to stop this, to fight this, and to stand with the American people in support of policies that will lower the cost, that lower inflation in this country and the cost of things that they need in their daily lives.
Well, let me just remind folks why Joe Biden's poll numbers are at historically low levels of approval of his activities, and it's because of what we're seeing in the economy. We are seeing, at this time, the Democrats' policies, Joe Biden's policies, have people all across the country struggling and suffering with 40-year high inflation, higher than many people in this room have ever seen in their lifetime. Families cannot keep up. People are falling behind. People in Wyoming can't afford a full tank of gas. People can't afford to buy a full week's worth of food at the grocery store. And now we have Joe Manchin going holding hands with Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer, jumping us over the cliff in terms of wanting to raise taxes and increase spending. Those are things that are going to make the economy even worse. They want to raise taxes in the middle of a recession. I know Joe Biden says it's not a recession. Google it. It's a recession. 2/3 of the American people believe and feel that they are living in the middle of a recession. And they come out with this 725-page bill that Manchin and Schumer apparently have agreed to. 725 pages. Each page costs more than $1 billion. You know that's going to add to inflation. The American people can see right through this. Yeah, we get the fact that when things don't go well for Joe Biden and his policies, he likes to change the definition of things. He did it when he described what happened in Afghanistan as a success. We've seen it when he describes the border as being secure, when we see hundreds of thousands of millions of people coming across illegally. We see it how he defined inflation in the past, said it was going to be temporary, transitory. Wasn't. It's still here. And now he's trying to do the same thing with the recession. Look, people see President Biden on television and they realize he is not up to the task of solving the problems for the people that he has caused. And now with Joe Manchin signing on to this, we are heading to double-digit inflation in this country. And you go through this whole bill, what do you see? You see the IRS being empowered to hire many more auditors, 86,000 more IRS agents. What do they want to do? They're going to audit people. We're talking about families and farmers and small businesses, making it much harder for families to get by. The burden of what they're placing on the American families is just absolutely awful. And what's not in the bill? Well, the things that American people are concerned about. This isn't actually going to lower the pain at the pump. This isn't going to take care of the chaos at the border or the crime in the cities. None of those things are going to be solved by what the Democrats are bringing forward. That's why 2/3 of the American people believe this president and this administration and the entire Democrats in the House and the Senate are heading in the wrong direction, and they're ignoring the things that are most important to the voters at home.
So I'm about to use 4 words in a row that I haven't used in this way before, and those 4 words are: Speaker Pelosi was right when she decided to include Taiwan on her visit to Asia, or if she'd just been going to Taiwan, that would have been right. She's the highest ranking American to be in Taiwan in 25 years. The last person to be there at that rank was the Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, when he went 25 years ago, and he was right to send that message that we believe in democracy and we believe that the Taiwanese people have a right to that democracy. That's exactly the message that Speaker Pelosi is taking with her today. China proved in Hong Kong that there is no one country, 2 systems. If you're going to be under the control of China, you're going to be under the control of China. And for us to make the point that Taiwan is important to democracy, that Taiwan is important to our national security, that Taiwan is important to our economy, is a good point to make, and I suspect others will be following Speaker Pelosi's example.
Our Iowa County fairs are starting to wind down, which means one thing. That means the Iowa State Fair is about ready to wind up. So the Iowa State Fair has long been a wonderful tradition for rural Iowa families celebrating agriculture, our rural communities in manufacturing. But unfortunately this year, for many of our farm families, they're facing some tough times. Over the course of the past year, with inflation approaching 10%, the added cost of diesel fuel has hit our farmers really hard. 300% cost increase in fertilizer. Many of these families that love to celebrate at the Iowa State Fair are going to be struggling through the Iowa State Fair. So while their kids will be taking their 4-H and FFA projects, their livestock to the Iowa State Fair, many of them are really going to have to tighten down on their wallets. We're in a recession, and a lot of these families that normally are exhilarated by the thought of spending a week and a half away from home with their livestock, with their projects, now are really struggling because that cost away from home is going to impact their families. They know we're in a recession, and now they know that the Democrats intend to increase taxes on them too. So while these folks are down and struggling through agriculture, now they've heard the news that some of these rural manufacturers may lose jobs. As NAM has predicted, if this bill that has been proposed by Schumer and Manchin passes, we'll lose 218,000 manufacturing jobs. They feel like they're being kicked while they're down, and they are. So let's start focusing on our families back home and what's right for them and getting through this recession, doing the right thing for agriculture. Let's put a little bit of joy back in their lives, and let's focus on American energy. Let's focus on American agriculture. Let's focus on our economy. We can do that, but it's going to take a heck of a lot different leadership coming out of the White House and out of Congress.
Since the Democrats took over the White House, the House, and the Senate, there's been a war on seniors in Florida. If you think about a typical senior in Florida, they're either on fixed income or they're getting ready to retire. So in the last year and a half, what's happened? Gas prices have skyrocketed, food prices have skyrocketed, rent's up. All of these things caused by the Democrats. So clearly they don't care about seniors in Florida. Now, the latest bill is going to cut Medicare. And these Democrats say, oh, they would never do that. Let me just read you a quote by Joe Biden. When I argued that we should freeze federal spending, I meant Social Security as well. I meant Medicare and Medicaid. I meant veterans benefits. I meant every single solitary thing in the government. This is Joe Biden. This is what they're doing. I mean, they're actually doing what he said they would do. They're actually cutting $280 billion out of the Medicare budget and not putting it back in to try to make it more solvent. So what we've got to do is we've got to figure out why the Democrats are doing this. I've asked for the Aging Committee, which I'm a member, hold a hearing. Why do the Democrats have this war on seniors in Florida? Why do they not care about gas prices, food prices? This new bill, the burden on every pay scale is going up. The tax burden is going up. I mean, this doesn't make any sense, and it's hurting seniors all across my state.
Joe.
You have expressed support for the Speaker's trip to Taiwan. You've also expressed support for fighting Russia and Ukraine here. There has been concern expressed in the New York Times today that the Speaker's trip may undercut what the United States was trying to do with China, not getting involved helping Russia in Ukraine. Do you think that that is a possibility and the Speaker is actually contributing to undercutting the effort in Ukraine by going to Taiwan?
No, just the opposite. I agree with Senator Blunt. I think it's important that the Speaker did go to Taiwan. I don't think the Chinese get to tell members of Congress where they can go. The single biggest deterrent to President Xi was said recently by the Prime Minister of Japan, which is to defeat Putin in Ukraine. That's the single biggest thing we can do to send a message to President Xi.
But explain why that doesn't undercut that, though, but based on that argument.
The second thing we need to do is to guarantee we increase the defense budget to deal with the reality of the situation in Asia, not only our strategic competition with China, but also providing appropriate weapons to the Taiwanese to defend themselves against these ongoing threats of invasion.
On the Taiwan issue, many are asking whether we are in a better position with China, whether there is less of a chance of conflict in the future. Yes, the speaker went to Taiwan. She didn't bow to threats by the Chinese, but at the same time, you had a very public disagreement between the administration and the speaker on whether she should have gone. Doesn't that show the Chinese that they have influence and can interfere? Aren't we giving them more?
Well, what it underscores, I think, is the mistake the president made in getting into reprimanding the speaker, in effect, publicly. I think he should have said nothing about it. It's not uncommon for American lawmakers to go to Taiwan. Senator Blunt pointed out we've had speakers go there before. Look, I think it's important for us to stand up for a democratic island directly involved in international commerce that elects its own leaders. And we know what the Chinese would like to do to Taiwan, just exactly what they did to Hong Kong. So I approve of her trip. I think she did the right thing. Yeah, Manu.
Did you all miscalculate in your handling of the burn pits bill, reversing your position and opposing the same bill, knowing that it's probably going to pass unchanged here?
Yeah, look, these kind of back and forths happen all the time in the legislative process. You've observed that over the years. I think in the end, the veterans service organizations will be pleased with the final result.
It passed today?
Gas prices have fallen for 7 straight weeks now. Are you worried that voters may be viewing inflation differently and that could help Democrats come November?
You're not surely saying you're satisfied with gas prices. They're still dramatically higher than they were when the president came to office. We're in the middle, as everyone knows, of a recession. That's 2 quarters in a row of negative growth and 40-year high inflation. I can't think of anything the administration has failed to do to screw all this up. And look at what the American people think of their performance. It's stunningly high, the disapproval. Finally, I would say to our friend Joe Manchin, he made a terrible deal, How he can defend this from a West Virginia point of view, or think of it as a centrist kind of agreement, is astonishing. This is an agreement only Bernie Sanders would love.
But do you have an agreement on the PACT Act?